Sometimes California statutes are looking to be liberally construed per the intent of the legislature. And so, a common feature of statutes is for the legislature to state its intent regarding how the courts and the judicial branch should liberally construe the statutory provisions that were enacted by the legislative branch of government. By my count, there are more than 250 of these statutes throughout California's 29 codes, running from the Business and Professions Code at the beginning all the way to the Water Code. And many of these code sections actually use the same language, but there are variations as you might expect. But they all contain the phrase liberally construed. So I went through and grabbed a few examples out of existing statutes, obviously not the 250 plus, but just wanted to pull a couple of examples to share some of the variations that utilize the legislature's stated intent for a statute to be liberally construed. So the first example is one from the Streets and Highways Code and one from the Water Code. Streets and Highways Code Section 31518 regarding the vehicle parking district law says this part shall be liberally construed. The part. Water Code Section 1248 regarding liability within a watershed applies to an article, and so it says this article shall be liberally construed. A second example comes to us from the Government Code. Government Code Section 38001 deals with the Park and Playground Act of 1909. And it says, this chapter shall be liberally construed to promote its objects. The third type of example is one from the Financial Code and two from the Government Code. So Financial Code Section 31001 regards business and industrial development corporations, and it states, this division shall be liberally construed to accomplish its purposes. Government Code Section 6578 concerns power to issue revenue bonds, and that code section states, this article shall be liberally construed to effectuate its purposes. Another example comes from Government Code Section 12603 that deals with environmental actions by the Attorney General of the state. And that code section says this article shall be liberally construed and applied to promote its underlying purposes. The fourth example comes from the Education Code and the Food and Agricultural Code. Education Code Section 21154 is regarding the institutions of arts and sciences. And that section says, the provisions of this article shall be liberally construed with a view to effect its objects and purposes. Food and Agricultural Code Section 5508 deals with roadside vegetation control. And that code section states, this chapter shall be liberally construed to accomplish its purposes and objectives. The last set of examples comes from the Business and Professions Code, and B&P Code Section 17002 deals with unfair trade practices. And that one says, this chapter shall be liberally construed that its beneficial purposes may be subserved. Now, do the state's courts have to accept these statements of legislative intent? The answer, unfortunately, is no. But there are more often than not citations by the courts to support their interpretation of what the legislature intended when the courts interpret these types of statutes that are to be liberally construed per the request of the legislature.